This video is sponsored by Kamikoto. Amazon has committed to spending $1 billion on Lord of the Rings: The Rings of Power over the course of 5 seasons to come. For that kind of an investment, they quite literally needed it to be $1 billion hit. But instead, it is rapidly turning into $1 billion disaster. And despite Amazon's best efforts, it's getting more and more difficult to hide this fact and this embarrassment from the world. Not helping Amazon in the slightest is Forbes magazine, because Forbes is read by bankers, investors and other capitalists around the world, the elite of whom Amazon founder Jeff Bezos hangs out with, and Forbes just published their most devastating hit piece on the Rings of Power yet. In this video, we will begin by looking into this article and explore how damaging it really is, before turning our gaze towards an article ironically aimed at protecting the show, and finally assess where the Rings of Power stands. In a September 18th article from Forbes, they came out swinging with the title "The Rings of Power has inexplicably terrible writing." Even if you were to stop reading right there, and let's be honest, most people do, this is an absolutely savage attack on Amazon. To appreciate just how bad this is, let's take a brief moment to look at an earlier article which could be construed as negative, but which still operated under certain rules, giving the powers that be a face-saving excuse for why the audience hadn't been won over. That's what CBR did back in March, when fans were rioting over the first released batch of production stills. CBR acknowledged that the response was bad, but nonetheless tried to run cover for both the Rings of Power and, as a bonus, Amazon's other disaster, The Wheel of Time. By claiming that fans were super duper hyped about both, it was just that the sets and costumes were a teeny tiny bit generic, and that caused some very few but very loud fans to complain. By contrast, Forbes calling Amazon out the way they're doing here and now is a full frontal assault on the competency and skills of the lead producers and writers, and by implication, the executives at Amazon who should have vetted them better. And again, I can't stress this enough, it's in Forbes. All the people Jeff Bezos has lunch and business meetings with are reading Forbes magazine. If it was in Deadline Hollywood or Variety, well then this would never have been written in the first place, but if it was, the damage would have been contained to the Hollywood circles and those following it. But this being in Forbes means that Bezos' own friends and social circle at his exclusive country club might crack jokes at his expense. And so far, we've just looked at the headline. It gets even worse in the article proper, as the Forbes correspondent writes. The creators of Amazon's The Lord of the Rings: The Rings of Power know how to create spectacle, but they don't know how to tell a good story. There it is, scrawled in blood on the wall. The writers and showrunners responsible for this show could have won me over with good fanfiction. They could have tossed Tolkien's lore onto a bonfire, and I'd have been perfectly happy if they'd simply crafted an enjoyable story with characters I care about. Unfortunately, The Rings of Power is written so poorly it defies even my worst fears. Oh yes, I was awed and impressed by the opening 2 episodes, just like many others. But my, how quickly a badly written TV series can wear out its welcome once the shimmer fades. What Forbes is saying right here is beyond brutal. Production companies like Amazon don't like to be criticized at all, but if there is no way around it. They prefer to be criticized for the technical aspects, because then they can always shift the blame to third-party contractors who let them down. That won't work here though, as Forbes actually praises the technical aspects, only to double down on how crappy the writing is by contrast. The article continues. The Rings of Power knows only how to glitter, and it's certainly not gold. It knows how to shoot pretty slow-motion shots of elves on horses or orcs leaping through the trees. It gets the giant statues of ancient elven kings and shining cities just right. It has a sweeping score that's lovely to listen to, but is, like the show's melodrama, perhaps a little too incessant. This is a show of spectacle, and it gets the spectacle mostly right. The problem is everything else. Galadriel's adventure in Númenor is honestly just embarrassing. Those are not my words, although it does sound like something I would say. But no, those are the words of Forbes magazine, and that is just twisting the proverbial knife. And on the topic of knives, Kamikoto makes authentic Japanese steel kitchen knives using traditional techniques from Japan. Kamikoto builds on the legacy of over 800 years of Japanese metallurgy expertise in creating the steel to make the knives, which in turn have been meticulously handcrafted using traditional techniques that date back to Japan's Edo period. The knives are used by Michelin star chefs all over the world, and having tried them, I can confirm they are perfect for the purpose they have been designed for, whether it be cutting fruits and vegetables, filleting fine Norwegian salmon, or cutting the toughest of meats. Each knife is individually inspected and comes with a lifetime guarantee. Showcasing traditional Japanese legacy, each knife also comes in a sturdy and highly decorative heavy-duty ash wood box, which not only ensures the knives are stored safely, but that they make for some great gifts. What is more, Kamikoto has several special offers going on right now, but since they're sponsoring this video, we of course have an even better deal for you. If you visit our landing page kamikoto.com/me50, which you'll also find in the description, and then use our code ME50 when ordering, you'll get an additional $50 off any purchase, including on top of any other special offer. So head on over to kamikoto.com/me50, type in our code ME50 upon checkout, and order your Japanese steel kitchen knives now. With that, let's take a look at the possible fallout of articles like this. In multiple earlier videos, we already established that while the initial batch of reviews from professional critics at first glance read as positive, many of them were quite measured, adding hedges and ways to walk back those positive reviews. We saw that just now in Forbes. I submit that quite a few of those critics only handed in positive reviews because their employer expected it of them, but privately they hated what they saw. So does the audience, and that increasingly makes the Rings of Power fair game. Before you know it, the very publications that gave such favorable reviews when it opened will be ganging up on it, if nothing else to show their readers that they're not completely out of touch. And we see more and more signs of that now, as the public response grows worse and worse for each passing episode. That public response is now getting so bad that even articles which still are meant to run cover come across as hit pieces. The backlash against the series has been so bad that on September 19th, Screen Rant saw fit to post an article intended to defend the series, but its mere existence and its presentation kind of comes off as another hit piece. In their article, titled "Why Galadriel Comes Off as Unlikable in the Rings of Power," they acknowledge that she is indeed unlikable, saying, "Galadriel's personality in the Rings of Power seems arrogant and abrasive when compared with the stately grace of Galadriel in The Lord of the Rings." But, as I said, this is meant to be defense, because their main point is this. Depending on the calculation, Galadriel was anywhere from 1,200 to 2,200 years old at the time of the Rings of Power, and in The Lord of the Rings she was roughly 7,000 years old. This was a substantial age differential. To illustrate the point in human years would be comparing an 8-year-old's level of experience and knowledge to that of a 40-year-old. The young Galadriel was still maturing, still learning. Her brash belligerence was a function of deep loss and monumental grief. The Rings of Power showed Galadriel as she was on her journey toward the powerful, serene Galadriel with whom viewers are most familiar. So basically, having lived as long as, say, 30 full human lifespans in a row, she is still young and immature and has to learn humility. Us humans do that when we start working in our 20s or 30s, but I guess elves must be a bit slow on the uptake and need a bit longer. The main point though is that the mere existence of an article like this is a testament to how bad things really are for the Rings of Power. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. And before you go, remember to head on over to kamikoto.com/me50. Type in our code ME50 upon checkout and order your authentic Japanese steel kitchen knives now.